The NFL draft will certainly be front and center on Thursday and Friday. And John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us now to take a look deeper at the NFL draft as we are getting there, and you're starting to hear, we got to start putting the BS meters up out there sometimes, John, and see what's out there. Let's start with the Myles Garrett stuff. How much weight does Warren Sapp's critique hold in this situation here? Do you think the Cleveland Browns are taking that to heart at all?
No, I don't think they're taking his critique to heart at all. But he said similar things a couple of years ago about Jadeveon Clowney. So, I mean, that's just Warren's mentality, is the fact that, and as a Hall of Fame player, he had, and it's generally, if you look at Hall of Fame defensive linemen, what sets them apart is sort of that nonstop motor. And he had it. And when he doesn't see it, he doesn't like it. And he doesn't think a guy deserves to be at the number one overall position. And if you see Myles on tape, it's legitimate. And people have pointed that out. He will occasionally take plays off and disappear. And, he's going to have to learn. You can't do that in the NFL. Either he does or he doesn't, but that doesn't mean he's not worthy of being rated where he is. He's a tremendously gifted player. And I think for the Browns, the weight comes to the owner. I mean, the owner's pushing, look, we got to get a quarterback. So to me, it comes down to, if Jimmy Haslam puts his foot down and says, we have to get a quarterback, and there's no guarantee Mitchell Trubisky is going to be there at number 12, that's the only way Myles Garrett's not going to be the number one overall pick, and that's a possibility.
John, there's a lot of things as we get down here. Right now, Cleveland, you tweeted you'd be stunned if the Browns pick anybody other than Garrett or Trubisky. There was some late hype here on Leonard Fournette. The Browns could pull a little fast one on draft day, but you think it's down to 2?
Yeah, it is. And if the Browns take Leonard Fournette at number 1 overall, they deserve every criticism ever levied at that organization. That would be the worst pick in the history of mankind. And to put it lightly, and even I don't think the Browns are that dumb to do that. So I think it comes down to just what I said. You have an owner who's really, really understanding that this is an organization that not only needs a quarterback, but they had the opportunity to get that quarterback last year, and he's getting a little bit angry. And he's saying, you're going to kick the can down the road another year. He's having a difficult time accepting that. I don't think there's any question. If you rate the players, Myles Garrett's better than Mitchell Trubisky, but we've said it time and time again that the importance of the position makes it more important to get a good player at quarterback than even a great player at edge rusher. That's just the way football is.
Yeah, John, and the 49ers and Bears, you tweeted out looking to move down. Do you think you'll see a lot of that in those teams at the top? It seems that there's so much depth in this draft. I saw somebody say that, hey, anywhere between 30 and 45, you're still getting first-round talented, graded players. So do you think you're going to see a plethora of teams trying to move themselves out of that top 5 area?
Yeah, I do. I think if you look at what's happened in the last few years and you look at what Tennessee was able to do by moving down, you look at what Cleveland was able to do and get the draft picks that they got. The hope is if you're San Francisco or Chicago and there's a quarterback there that you don't like, somebody else is going to be desperate enough to move up and give you something like that. So Chicago's got kind of gone the short-term route with Mike Lennon, and they don't think Mitchell Trubisky is going to be there, and I agree with them. So if you're not going to get the guy you potentially want, then you start to look to move down. And generally, the history of this league, at least recently, is there will be teams willing to move up to go get a quarterback.
Hey, John, you also tweeted that the Bills, you don't think they're going to pass on Watson at 10. So you think there could be some interesting chess matches moving into that spot as well, that, hey, we need a quarterback, Buffalo. So that's an interesting thought process there, because the Bills, Taylor, they drafted Manuel in the first round a couple of years ago. So you think they could be swinging for another QB in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, you have to realize it's a different regime. Even though Doug Whaley's still there, he's probably on his way out, and they have Sean McDermott as head coach. So the past mistakes at that position don't necessarily register to the new regime. And I believe if Deshaun Watson's there at number 10, the Bills are taking him. So my point of tweeting that is, if you want a quarterback, you got to get up to number 9 if you want one of the top 2 quarterbacks. And that's where it starts. And that's where Trubisky and Watson are going to go, somewhere in that range. So if you're Cleveland, we go back to Cleveland, they have number 1 and number 12. So you can't pick Garrett at number 1 and assume a quarterback's going to be there at number 12, because the top 2 are not going to be there.
Yeah, John, that's what I wanted to know. How many quarterbacks do you see going in round 1? How many do you think are legitimate round 1 first-round picks?
Well, that's a good question. I think 4 are going to go. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to go. I think Deshaun Kaiser is going to go in the first round. Whether they're legitimate first-round selections, I personally think 3 are. I'm not as high on Patrick Mahomes as other people are, but I believe he'll be the 3rd quarterback selected. He's got tremendous arm strength. His skill set might be the best of all 4, just from a pure talent level, but he's such an absolute mess mechanically. I would want nothing to do with him, because it's going to take years to sort of break him down and build him back up. So I think he's a long-term project. And as we kind of saw with Jared Goff last year, it's difficult when you get guys like that.
Long-term projects, NFL draft coming fast and furious. How about the Jets? They've gone QB the last few years. Are they going to go down that road again, the New York Jets, and maybe make a mistake again?
I think it showed that they already think they've made plenty of mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, they have to get a quarterback, but I don't know if one's going to be there for them. I know they like Adams, the safety from LSU. And they're another team, because he might not be there for them, and they're another team that might look to trade down if the player they want is not there. But all of a sudden, when you talk about all these teams that want to trade down, at some point, if everybody wants to trade down, it's not going to work. So while we say the draft is pretty deep, and it is at certain positions, everybody can't trade down. So at some point, you're going to have to take the best player available, and the Jets could use a lot of help in a lot of different places.
John, are there quarterbacks in this draft that could be enticing out of the first round that we're not really hearing about?
Quarterbacks?
Yes.
There's Davis Webb from California is probably going to be a 2nd-round pick, and Brad Kaya from Miami is probably going to be more of a mid-round pick. He was a guy who came out on top of the Wonderlic scores for the quarterback. So the theory there is that he's got the mental acuity to develop and at least understand an NFL offense, but I'm not very high on him from a physical standpoint. So, I think as a whole, Nathan Peterman from Pittsburgh is a potential 2nd-round pick. And it just speaks to the desperation at that position. I think if you need a quarterback, there's 3 potential guys that could be an answer. And it's Trubisky, it's Watson, and it's Kaiser, and that's it. And I think the rest of the guys are just backups or projects that you can hopefully develop down the line.
So since those are the three guys you're high on, take all the quarterbacks, though. Which of the quarterbacks will be drafted too high, and which of those potential first-round guys is not a first-rounder?
Well, I think Mahomes is not, as I said. He's definitely going to be. I don't think he belongs in that category. I think people have gotten enamored with his arm strength, and they've overlooked some of the mechanical issues and the fundamentals he lacks at this stage. So he's the one guy who's definitely going in the first round. I think the floor for him is Houston in the 20s, and he's not going to reach that far. I think somebody's going to pick him earlier than expected even because they are in love with his arm strength, and I think it's a mistake. The one guy fallen who I've liked since the beginning of the process, and I haven't wavered, is Kaiser. And a lot of it is because his own college coach keeps insulting him. It's just the weirdest thing in the world. Saying he should have stayed in college, Brian Kelly, and he probably should have. I mean, everybody could use more seasoning. And just from an off-the-field standpoint, as far as growing up, he compared himself to sort of having the mental acuity of Tom Brady and the physical skills of Cam Newton. So that's kind of – you can look at that two ways. And I kind of said, well, it shows he has the swagger to play the position, but it's also ridiculous to compare yourself to players like that. So – look, all the quarterbacks have holes, but they have holes every year. Every single quarterback. I mean, to me, this year is no different than the Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota year or last year, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, where quarterbacks went 1-2. The only difference is I think these guys, Trubisky specifically, Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Kaiser, and Patrick Mahomes are paying for the sins of Jared Goff and just how bad he was last season. I think in a lot of ways, these guys are paying for that.
John, we want to direct people to our website, 973ESPN.com, and check a look at your 7-round Eagles mock draft, which seems to be starting off nicely. Conley, Mixon, which will raise some eyebrows. We'll dive more into that in tomorrow's conversation. Ryan Anderson, yeah, he can hit the 3 in the 3rd round, if you need him for the Rockets. I mean, from Alabama, sorry. Then in the 4th round, Tabor. Here was a guy people were looking at as a first-round pick. You think he could slip all the way to round 4?
Yeah, I think he could slip even further because he's a quarterback and he ran a 4.7. So if you can't run, you can't play cornerback in the NFL, at least at a high level. And the fact that you're right, I mean, before he ran, people talked about him as a potential first-round pick. But the fact of the matter is he was so bad in his 40-yard dash times that he's off the table now, likely until day 3. And I think Philadelphia's a great fit for him for a number of reasons. Obviously, they need cornerbacks, but also Jim Schwartz is kind of known for using zone cornerbacks well. And if he runs a 4.7, well, he's not going to be a great bump and run corner. He's got to turn into a zone corner and sort of be a heady type player. So I think he's a good fit for the Eagles.
Your thoughts on the players that you believe the Eagles are zoned in on at 14?
Well, I tweeted out, I think the final 4 that they're looking at are Gary and Conley, who I put, Christian McCaffrey, Charles Harris, and John Ross, the speedy wide receiver out of Washington. Now, the concern is, as things continue to go down, we saw Reuben Foster fail the drug test. That's probably going to knock him out. You see some of the other things going around the league. The Saints are no longer in play to acquire Malcolm Butler at cornerback, so that could put them into the Conley sweepstakes at number 11. I've heard the Cincinnati Bengals have heavy interest in Ross at number 9, and I'm starting to think Christian McCaffrey is going to go to Carolina at number 8. So if that happens, then it could be a disaster, because I think the fourth of those 4 players, I'm not very high on. I think the Eagles are wrong if they want to take Charles Harris at that position. However, if things go in a different direction, I think any of those 3 other options would be home runs for this team, and all would be very helpful. I'm on board saying McCaffrey would be the guy I would take if he's there. John Ross, I think, is a tremendous fit for this team if he's healthy, and Conley also, because there's such an obvious need at corner. The one guy I would be concerned about would be Harris.
All right, the NFL Draft, of course, will be live from Philadelphia on Radio Row on Thursday. Pete, John, I, Scott will all be up there for the NFL Draft, and we'll see Friday should be a very interesting day to see what Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, let's not minimize the effect of Joe Douglas and Andy Weidel in this whole situation as well, as a very big draft for Howie. Let me ask you this. If the Eagles bomb on this draft, in other words, they have a season and they don't make the playoffs and the first-round pick is Marcus Smith, you think Howie's in trouble?
No, because I mean, he's at the behest of the owner. If there's one guy the owner trusts, it's Howie Roseman. And I think, as we've seen in the past, it's more likely that Joe Douglas would end up in trouble than Howie Roseman. I don't necessarily think that's the way it should go, but that's just the reality. There's nobody that Jeffrey Lurie trusts more than Howie Roseman. So for better or for worse, I think he's here, and I think he's here for good after what happened with Chip Kelly. Jeffrey Lurie considered that a mistake, taking power away from Howie Roseman. I don't think he's going to do it again.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. We'll look deeper at his mock draft. Take a look at it at 97.3 ESPN.com. His Eagles 7-round mock draft with some very interesting names throughout there. And check a look at the positions John targets later on over on our website, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, we'll talk tomorrow, pal.
Hey, thank you.